This program is brought to you by the Department of Education at Agnes Scott College. For more information, please visit our website at agnesscott.edu.
So good morning. This is our final conversation about the Lorraine Hansberry's play Raisin. So what we want to try to do in our conversation about the text today is wrap up. So feel like we have a sort of final commentary about it. But I also want to go back to one of the words that I offered to you in our last conversation, which is the word subtext, because that's going to frame the work that we do with the play today. The idea of subtext is an actor's or a director's tool. So the way that an actor interacts with the words on the page is she or he decides what the character is thinking about or saying in his or her head as the lines from the play are being said out loud. So sarcasm is a really good example for subtext, because we might say something like, "That cake looks really good." That would be our line. But what we actually mean is, there's no way I would eat anything that looks like that, right? So the words would be, "That cake looks really good," but the subtext tells the listener, in our case the reader, or in the audience's case the viewer, what to really understand about what's being said. So the words, the actual text, and what's beneath the text, the subtext, are often completely in conflict with each other in terms of meaning. Does this make sense to you? So it's one of the ways that we understand sarcasm or irony. We wouldn't even know what sarcasm or irony is if we didn't have the notion of subtext. That's a really important word for the actor. When the actor looks at the script, that's what he or she does for the character that's being played. They go through line by line and they do a critical analysis of what's being said there. And that tells us, the audience, what that character is feeling or thinking. That's why we read it as a story, because the actor has made those kinds of subtextual choices. We're going to do just a little bit of writing. So what I'm going to ask you to do, just for 5 minutes, and I'll time you, so you've only got 5 minutes to do the writing. I want you to pick the character that your group was working on last time. So do you remember who you were? You were either Mama or Walter or Benita or Ruth. And so you remember that character. So there will be several people working on the same character. And your objective is to choose a line, or we can call it a passage, essentially some piece that character says in the play. So you're going to find one of those scenes perhaps that you were working on last time, and you pick a line or a passage from that character. And what I want you to do is I want you to let that line become representative of more than what's there. So you're going to create this sort of, what we call for the actor would be an internal monologue. So what is the character thinking or saying in his or her head underneath that particular line? And we're going to go more than just like translation of line by line, like, "Oh, that cake looks good," to, "Oh, no, I really don't want any of that cake." But what else is going on for the character in that moment? So you're essentially taking about 5 minutes to try to spin that line out. You're thinking about what are all the possible things that the character is thinking or imagining or saying to him or herself in that moment. Okay, so here's what I'd like for us to do with this work that we just created. I'm going to ask us to use some of what you've written to help us deepen our understanding of these characters. And then we're going to turn it into an acting exercise. And so I'll show you how we move from the writing into a little bit of performing. So you don't have to be actors today, but I'm going to use a tool that sometimes that actors use to help us think more deeply about character. So what I'd like for us to do first is let's start with the character of Mama. So if you had Mama, all right, Chastity did. So Chastity, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to tell us where in the play you drew the phrase, and we were going to read that, and then we want to hear what you wrote. Here, Chastity.
Okay, at this moment, Walter has said he's basically, him and Ruth have gotten into an argument about something, and Mama gets involved, and he like mouths off to Mama, and they get into an argument, and that's when she says, "You were a disgrace to your mother." He basically is very rude and disrespectful. she's gonna have to go clean it up.
There's a vision of Mama as disappointed, but essentially like picking herself up and moving forward.
Right.
Like you're saying that she wanted Walter to be able to take over.
Mhm.
He's not able to do it,
Right.
so she's taking back herself.
Right.
She's taking back things back into her own hands. All right. Do we have another moment for Mama?
It's the bottom page of it, so she's looking at her plant and she's talking about her plant. And how does that work?
Is it her last monologue? The one that begins, "Well, I always want to be a garden"?
No, it's the one that says they spirited already my children. It's when she's actually watering the plant.
Okay, so she's looking at her plant, sprinkling a little water on it. And then what you did is the subtext for that particular line.
Yeah.
Joe, would you be our Mama? It's the bottom of page 52. It's just the speech that says, it begins looking at her plant and sprinkling a little water on it.
They spirited all right, my children. That's why they got spirits. I don't know, and they never had enough sunshine for them to look at it.
And it kind of emphasizes the fact that her kids have never really had a lot and that they're still thriving like the plant is, like even though it's never had some things that other people deem as necessary for the plant to survive, or children, like money or whatever. And they're still doing okay, and they're still trying to be better than they were. And she's really, like, she recognizes that her children have had a lot, and she is kind of, like, I guess, saddened because of that fact that she also.
What I'd like to do with what we've just managed in our discussion is move that into this short exercise that's called a hot seat. And so if you're an actor and you're trying to develop your character even further, this is an exercise or game that you might play with the rest of the folks in your cast. So I'm gonna ask Chastity if you'll start, if you don't mind, just because you are our first person. And so Chastity, in her piece, was talking about Mama, and she offered us some information about what she thought was going on for Mama in this particular moment. And so what I'm going to ask Chastity to do is to take the hot seat, which is here in front of the room.
Alrighty.
All right. And so this is entirely improvisational, this work. There's no way to do it wrong. So Chastity is just imagining, and that's exactly what's going on for the actor when the actor is doing this exercise as well. They're just imagining things and trying to make it up. So it doesn't have to be right. But they are trying to base what they say to us about the character on what they know of that character from having read the script closely, which is what we've been doing. So several of you are going to get a chance to do this, but what I'm going to ask Chastity to do is just pretend for a few moments with us that she is Mama, and that she's come to the class, and we want to know more about her as a character, and it's our job to ask her questions that are going to let us know more about her. So we all have a role to play here, but Chastity is in character. She's playing the role of Mama. And we're trying to help, in the world of acting, what's happening is we're trying to help the actress, in this case Chastity, think more deeply about the character. For our purposes, we're trying to think more deeply about who these characters are, like what Lorraine Hansberry has created for us. So Chastity's going to be kind of the vehicle that allows us to do that. Does it make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Was that the first time you slapped your daughter?
No. That wasn't the first time I slapped my daughter. That was the first time that I felt as though I really needed to get in her face and let her know that, look, you have an education, but I'm way older than you, and I brought you in this world, and I'll take you out. Like, you need to understand that just because you're in college and you have all this background knowledge, God was my college. That got me through. That got you here. So you're not going to turn around and I had to be the mom, and I had to step up and put my foot down because she was getting way too she was just feeling herself too much. So I had to bring her back.
What's the thing that you're most afraid of in the world?
You stumped me, Dr. The thing that I'm most afraid of in the world, it would have to be I don't want people to, no, that's not how I phrase it. The thing that I'm most afraid of is my children leaving the nest and completely leaving everything that they've ever been taught. Getting out in the world and not being secure in who they are and not taking with them what they've been taught from home and completely just flopping. Because they are so, oh, it's the world, everything's so new, everything's so grand, everything's so wonderful, they forgot where they come from.
Thank you, Chastity. All right. So do you see how the work makes the actor think more deeply, and it lets us think more deeply about these characters as well? All right, so let's look at Ruth. Who'd be willing to play our Ruth? We're going to change the exercise slightly, but we need somebody who would be Ruth for us. We're going to do something similar, but we're going to change the exercise just slightly. So before we were asking questions of the character. We're going to ask a few questions of Shantice as she plays the character of Ruth, but we're also going to do something that's called shadow work, and this is connected to the idea of subtext. So Ruth is going to say something to us, and then we're going to try to imagine what's beneath what she's saying to us. And so I'll demonstrate it for you, and then I'm going to ask you to help me play this exercise out just a little bit. So we'll start with a couple of questions for Ruth, and then I'll show you how this works. So what questions do you have for the character of Ruth? Grace.
What were your dreams? Or did you have big aspirations in life that you didn't accomplish?
I dreamed that I would have a functional family. I dreamed that I would be living beyond the means of what I'm living now. I dreamed that my husband would be successful in that he did follow one dream, and this one dream panned out the way that he thought it would. And I thought that we would just be able to survive better than what we are now.
How does it feel to be such a vital part of the family that keeps the family together, but then also have the husband put you down?
Okay, so how does it feel to essentially have to play the stalwart character, the backbone of the family, and at the same time your husband is putting you down for that, okay? All right, so Shantice, I'm going to let you answer in just a minute. But what we're going to imagine is what I'm going to call the shadow characters. So for any character, for any of us, in any given moment in our lives, there is the reality of that specific moment, like there are the circumstances that are surrounding us, and then there's all the other stuff that's going on for us, which often is connected to our own histories. So we are responding to any given moment based partially on all the things that have happened to us before. So it's impossible for us practically to divorce ourselves from our own histories as we have a response. So what we want to imagine in this moment where Ruth is being asked a question like, what does it feel like to try so hard and not be backed up by your own husband? Which is interesting because he's saying the same thing to her. What we want to imagine is Ruth's history. And what would be the voices, the multitude of voices that might be in her head when she responds to a question like that, the historical voices. So there's Ruth as a little girl, there's Ruth as the person who first met Walter, there's Ruth as the daughter-in-law to this sort of very domineering mother in a way, mother-in-law. There's Ruth as the mother of a little boy who has hopes and dreams of his own and who has Ruth. All of those shadows exist behind the character of Ruth who's in this particular moment. Does this make sense to you? So what we want to imagine is what any number of those characters might be answering to the same question. So the question is about being the backbone of the family and what it feels like to have that not being honored by Walter, your husband. And then we have Ruth, the woman who's in the scene with us right now, who's answering that, and that's going to be Shantice. But then we have these other characters, the other versions of Ruth, the shadow characters of her, who also have answers to the same question. All right? So what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you think that you might be able to imagine Ruth in one of those other characters, I'd like you to just come and stand behind her. And I'm going to ask at least 3 people to do this. So if you have, and again, it's improvisational work, so anything you do is fine. But if you think you could imagine Ruth as some other version of herself, just come stand behind her. So don't even tell us which version of her you're imagining yet. All right, so you're just going to stand behind her. These are essentially the shadows of the character of Ruth that we see in front of us. And so we have this question that Francis asked, and Shantice, I'm going to let you answer it last. Okay? So we have Ruth, the character, as she is portrayed in the script. We're going to have that character speak last, and we're going to have the other character speak first. All right? So, Grace, who are you?
I'm Ruth when we first got married.
So, you find yourself having to be the backbone of this family a lot, and Walter doesn't seem to appreciate that. What do you think of that?
Well, I would have never expected that when we, I don't expect that. I think that Walter loves me and we're in a relationship, and I had the aspiration of being a wife and a mother and being that backbone, because that's what I feel like my role as the mother and wife is. But I'm surprised that I feel squashed in that role instead of empowered as the backbone and as the woman behind the man.
Because it's not what you would have expected when you were
Yes.
younger. Okay. And Francis, who are you?
I'm Ruth as having a son that I take care of who has no kids.
Okay.
And it's really hard to be put down when I'm back home, because I realize that I take care of I take care of the house, I take care of my son or our son, and I feel like Walter doesn't understand how hard it is to have to take care of a child, because he's a child himself, and he doesn't really, I have a feeling that he's trying to do this for us, but at the same time, he needs to step up and realize that, you have to do things that are going to be more sensible, especially if you have a little son to worry about, and one on
Okay. And Chelsea, who are you?
I'm young Ruth, like before she was married.
Before
and-
she knew Walter, or
Well, right.
before she even knew Walter?
Right.
Okay.
And my answer to this question would be, it's disappointing, but I kind of expected it because I watched it in my household. Like, I felt like it's a cyclical thing. Like, it's an ongoing generational thing, and I watched this happen in my house. And, the woman is never really appreciated the way she should be. She's never given the thanks or appreciation that she should with any man, because that's just how they are.
So that was what it was like for your own parents?
Right.
Okay, now Shantice, you're Ruth as we see her in the play. What would you respond to this question?
I would say that I did see this when I was younger, actually, so I would have gone with that aspect as well. Like, I would have seen this when I was younger, but yeah, I still had hopes that it would be better. I had hopes that, what he's saying is true, and it's going to pan out better than my family, like the generation before me did.
Okay, great, thank you all. Your assignment for Thursday is to meet with your small group, the group that you were with last time, when you worked on either the Beneath the character, the Mama character, Ruth character, or Walter. You're going to be with the same group of people, so I'll let you at the end of class just remind yourselves of who those are. But we're going to do this exercise, the one that you just saw here, with fences. All right, so our next play is the play Fences. So next Tuesday, when we see each other, what you are going to have done with your small group is you're going to have picked a scene, and make it short, some specific scene from the play, and you're going to do for us, essentially, we're going to read the scene together. You'll read it with us, or you can have us read it with you, and then you're going to do this exercise for us, where you choose one or more of the characters, and you have laid it out like this for us, where you've thought it through, and you're going to essentially perform that little thing that we just did with this character Ruth. So we have the characters in the middle. We're going to ask that character some questions, and you're going to have decided who the various versions of that character are and how they would respond to some of the questions that we asked.